Well, hey there, YouTube. It's Petey Two Finger, and I'm going to be reading a comment on a YouTube video. The channel is called The Mudman, and The Mudman has a lot of really good Pink Floyd related content. This particular video is titled Roger Waters and David Gilmour Interview 1984. So you can imagine this comment section is filled with a lot of people actually being supportive towards Roger, and then there's some people who take the other side, of course. Typically what you'll find is the majority of the people commenting will tend to bash on Roger Waters. So I'm going to read this comment here. Roger forced his hand during the final cut, which is the band's last album. So he forced his hand during the final cut because David Gilmour betrayed Roger Waters very badly during the production of the film The Wall. There is an extremely sad and telling story that most Floydians who comment on the band's dissolution do not know, of which involves David's betrayal of Roger. Alan Parker was the director of The Wall movie, and Roger Waters were at odds about the direction of the Wall film. They were fighting like cats and dogs, is what I've heard, about what would be in this movie, how the movie would go. Roger had a different opinion about how it should be, and Alan Parker was just kind of forging ahead, doing things differently, doing things that would really anger Roger Waters. David Gilmour skillfully betrayed Roger, specifically relating to who would get final cut, which is the editing privileges of the Wall movie. Roger and the director, Alan Parker, were fighting bitterly while the film was being made. David stole this final cut editing privilege from Roger. This was, in fact, the true ending of the band Pink Floyd. It was a really bad thing for David Gilmour to do, because Roger Waters had a very tough time with his divorce when his first wife left him, and his breakdown was the impetus of The Wall. It was, in fact, Roger's story, his own personal recounting of the darkest times of his existence, which had shaped The Wall into the piece that it is. The way that Alan Parker was aiming to produce the film was not what Roger Waters had in mind, and this was the source of the conflict with director Alan Parker. Swiftly and privately, David Gilmour went to Alan Parker and said, "Do not worry about Roger Waters." We, meaning Dave, representing the rest of the members of the band Pink Floyd, meaning Rick Wright, who had been previously fired during the Wall sessions, and also drummer Nick Mason. So we, David, Rick, and Nick, will back you, Alan Parker, to have final cut editing privileges of the Wall movie. Legally, the way the process of this film's production had been left to the process of a voting system, and Gilmour served as the conspirator who removed the final cut editing privilege from his bandmate and creator of The Wall, Roger Waters. Roger ultimately felt Alan Parker ruined The Wall movie. This is why the next and final Pink Floyd album is called The Final Cut. Also, Roger used to visit the set of The Wall movie wearing a suit jacket that had a large knife sticking out the back of it, symbolizing that this man had been, in fact, stabbed in the back. And this suit jacket is pictured on the Final Cut album. Now, there is much conjecture. So many people saying things like, Roger can't sing, and David Gilmour is the real musician of Pink Floyd. It makes me angry. It really does. Just STFU, because you were not there. And you do not even know the basic facts about what went down. Roger got screwed by DG big time. DG orchestrated this coup in the band, which Roger had been doing all the heavy lifting in for some time, making these incredible albums and tours leading into film, and David stole Final Cut from Roger, gifting it to Alan Parker, and it worked. David Gilmour did this knowing Roger would blow his top and leave the band Pink Floyd, and at that point, perhaps Gilmour himself could take the reins of the band and then pull off some world tours in an attempt to make himself very, very rich. Perhaps this was all about the money. I'm going to interject here. This time in Gilmour's life, he ended up going through a divorce too. But it was because, well, that was a little bit later on, but it was because he was doing mountains of cocaine. And all of that blow he was doing, it was noted he was doing that on tour. I was crushed by David Gilmour's limousine in a tunnel when I was attempting to exit the baseball stadium in Milwaukee that was crammed full of fans that were leaving. And Gilmour decided to plow his limousine through the crowd of people because he was in a hurry to get back to his hotel room stash. And I literally thought my ribs were going to crack when his massive stretch limo drove through the crowd of people, squishing us in this tunnel. It was one of the most horrific and frightening moments of my life. Ultimately, it is a fact that Roger is worth almost more than double, but not quite 3 times the amount of money that David Gilmour is worth, by the way. And that kind of settles it in my mind. Perhaps Roger Waters did beat David Gilmour at his own game, which was that just what it was all about? Was shekels counting for Dave? Not the music, or even more so trying to change the world for the better. I like to look at it this way. Roger, well, at least he really tried to make a difference or to change the world. When you look at his message, of course you can choose to disagree, whether you agree with Roger Waters or not. You cannot say that he failed to really try to get through to people. For instance, the last solo Waters tour. Did you see the last solo Roger Waters tour? Because I did. And he was using large font text on the screen to deliberately type it out for the audience. So you kind of had nowhere to hide. There was a lot of subliminal stuff and even some magic on display. But man, not too many people caught it. I spoke to a lot of people about the tour personally. I have not missed a single Roger Waters tour. I saw all of them. From the first one, July 28th, 1984. And the funny thing, this last show, it was 38 years to the date. It was also on July 28th here in Chicago, this time at the United Center. So yeah, my boy Roger seems to have his shit together on a lot of different levels. But nobody seems to notice. I was babbling about this date thing all over the internet. I managed to speak to 4 people who had tickets who had also been to the same show that I attended 38 years previously to the date, but none of them were aware of this fact that it was the same date. They were clueless. Not unlike the 99.99999% of the comments I read on Pink Floyd related content.